Good evening, everybody, and many thanks for coming to this event this evening. And I must say, I'm just blown away by the welcome I've received from the people I've met only since Sunday evening here in Bermuda. And I'm honoured to be here to give you a flavour of the work I'm doing in Preston, in the hope that you will all find something of use and of interest. I'd like to thank, before I carry on, I'd like to thank the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation for inviting me and for their welcome and hospitality. In particular, I would like to thank Mr. William Spriggs, the Director of Economic and Cooperative Development, Ms. Erica Smith, Executive Director of the BEDC, and all the team at the BEDC, especially Ms. Selina Bean in the back there, for working away in the background. Thanks to the community and business representatives, some of whom are here tonight from North Hamilton, who came to my social dreaming workshops yesterday. More on that later. And thank you to Senator Hayward and Premier Burt for supporting this event. We have to begin with Mondragón. Mondragón is a little town, a little city rather, or a big town in the north of Spain, in a part of Spain called the Basque Country, where 55 years ago they began their cooperative development from absolutely nothing. And I'm going to begin with Mondragón because that's our model for the Preston model. A lot of what happened in Mondragón is the inspiration for what we're doing in Preston today. In addition to that, I'll be mentioning other examples which have also influenced the Preston model, examples from the USA, the Cleveland model, for example, and explaining how what we've done in Preston is we've taken little bits from here, little bits from there, and applied it to our situation in Preston. That, of course, means that if you want to do this kind of thing in Bermuda, it's not a question of taking the Preston model and plonking it in Cuba. It's a question of understanding the different models that exist and being able to be flexible and adapting aspects of different models to the reality here in Bermuda. And of course, you are the people who understand Bermuda, not me. So what I'm saying is I'm talking about other models, and hopefully some of those ideas will inspire fresh thoughts and innovative and creative progress for the particular situation in Bermuda. However, whether it's Bermuda, Cleveland, Italy, Mondragón, Preston, wherever it is, these principles, these cooperative principles exist all over the world. And that is the absolute basis for understanding what a cooperative is, both in terms of a business and also in terms of the way the business influences the community. These are principles which make us human, hence the Mondragón motto, humanity at work, putting human beings, putting people, putting relationships, putting communities and society one step ahead of the finance that supports it. So these principles, we haven't got time to go into them in any great depth, but things such as democratic organization, sovereignty of labor, participatory management, all of these things are things which define what it means to be in a cooperative. So when you work in a business that's a cooperative, you are also participating in democracy. And if you're participating in democracy, then you're developing your sense of citizenship. And if you're developing a sense of citizenship, you're more likely to be at one with the community and to renovate or rebuild things which, for one reason or another, have started to fade away. So these principles are not just management principles for cooperatives, they are, in a sense, principles for living, principles for life. Education, universality, social transformation. This is not just, as I said, about businesses. It is. Worker-owned cooperatives are businesses, but social transformation, the way we live, is an essential part of developing cooperatives. So all of these are essential, and all of these are followed to the letter, particularly in a place like Mondragón. Now, this character on the right is José María Arizmendiarrieta. He is the founder of the Mondragón Cooperatives, and I think it's a great picture there because, you know, if you think of inspirational people in the world, maybe José María Arizmendiarrieta didn't... Hello? Yeah. Didn't quite fit that bill. So there he is with his bicycle, and of course, as you can see, he was a Catholic priest, and the fact that he was a Catholic priest, as opposed to some charismatic entrepreneur, gives you a lot of clues about what this is all about, because it's the principles of his religion put into practice in community that created the foundations for the principles of the cooperatives in Mondragón and around the world. And I think that this little quotation, of course, he's got a little book of quotations. It's difficult to choose the right one, but this one here I find particularly interesting and particularly illustrative of the spirit of it all. The cooperative enterprise is a living organism. So it's not a machine. It's a living organism. It's a society of people in community supported by solidarity. Absolutely key. We're not fighting each other. We're not racing to the top. We're not backstabbing. This is all about solidarity. And the awareness of this solidarity is the driving force we should place our confidence in. Having confidence and belief in people, in the way we live, in families, friends, relationships, businesses which work together in cooperation. Oh. So this I think, sums it up in a PowerPoint presentation. Cooperatives and community and humanity all join together, and you put them in a funnel, and you get the living organism. And that is really what a cooperative is. Cooperatives, community, and humanity. All of those inextricable in the sense that they're connected and yet identifiable in separate ways. We're going to have a look now at a promotional video for the Mondragón Cooperative Corporation.
We are one of the most important business groups in Spain and the leading group in the Basque Country. With a notable industrial, financial, and commercial activity, which supports knowledge, innovation, and intercooperation. Present in the 5 continents, with over 100 of our own production centres, commercial establishments, and multidisciplinary local offices, which allow us to respond immediately, flexibly, and with service. Over 100 consolidated international projects have provided us with a global knowledge of the markets and the peculiarities of each region, and a profound experience in several areas. Mondragón brings together expert productive capacity in numerous industrial divisions, which allows us to drive new businesses, generate synergies to formulate global projects, and add worldwide economies of scale. In a market which demands flexible and comprehensive solutions, intercooperation among our companies is a strategic key. Our financial area is made up of banking, Laboral Cucha, one of the most solvent institutions in the Spanish market, insurances, and a social protection system which manages a significant equity fund. In the trade area, we have a broad network of hypermarkets and supermarkets. Travel agencies, perfumeries, opticians, sports equipment shops, petrol stations. A culture of innovation has been vital for the successful competition of our companies. We generate, share and apply knowledge through our innovation ecosystem, consisting of 15 of our own technology centres, investments in the units for research and development of companies, participating in collaborative projects with global leaders, and a constantly expanding university, committed to social and entrepreneurial transformation. This internationally recognized intercooperation allows us to anticipate needs and direct the research, and deal with a rapid technological transfer, creating products with greater added value, increasing productivity and quality, and having an impact with differentiating projects. More than half a century of experience vouches for our global reference business model, where employee participation in the property boosts results and accelerates the necessary transformations. When the only thing which is certain is that change is constant, the talent of motivated people, innovation, internationalization, and the ability to intercooperate are the keys to remaining competitive.
Okay, so how impressive is that? Let me just explain how impressive it is. Every single person in that video is a worker owner, an equal worker owner with everyone else. It's a fantastic achievement. Not only that, what about the high technology involved, the industries that you can see there? How did that come about? In 50 years, it came about from zero, from absolutely nothing. So it's incredibly impressive, and it just goes to show it can be done. Because one of the things that people often confront me with is, hey, that sounds great, that sounds utopian, how are you going to make that work? It's impossible. But this demonstrates it is possible, and it's possible in a big way. So I think that's very inspirational for anybody who's thinking about businesses and communities and society. So this very simple but very informative model was given to me by Michael Lefamith from the Mondragón Cooperative Corporation, and it's a very simple way of understanding the essential ingredients in the Mondragón cooperative model, which the Preston model is largely going to be based on. So it's envisaged as a table with 4 legs. The tabletop consists of the network of co-ops, interconnected and held together by the Mondragón Cooperative Corporation, who manage the interconnections between each co-op. So a co-op is never isolated, and a co-op is never competing with another co-op. On the contrary, each co-op is contributing to the other co-op's needs and helping each other to develop. That doesn't mean they're not competing. They're definitely competing, but they're not competing with each other. They are competing with businesses elsewhere. So that is the network at the top and tabletop there, supported by 4 legs. And as far as Mondragón is concerned, the most important of those 4 legs is the education. And that is not something you might have thought of in the first instance, but that's what they insist on, and that's what I've come to understand and believe for the work we're doing in Preston. Because it's a it's a bit of a challenge to kind of change your idea of business from a regular kind of business model to what they do in Mondragón. You need to think about it. You need to change the culture. You need to change the way you think. You need to understand how to develop relationships with other people. And all of that takes a little while. So education is one of the legs. Welfare and health. They developed a welfare system for all the workers in Mondragón at a time when there was no health provision for them in 1950. Finance. What happened? They wanted to create co-ops and nobody would lend money to co-ops. Even today, if you're a big bank, how often are you going to say, yeah, fine, okay, small business, small cooperative, I'll lend you some money to get on? No way, doesn't happen. Didn't happen then, doesn't happen now. So how did they get their money? They said, hey, we'll create a bank. We'll create our own bank. We'll do it out of nothing. And they did. It's called Caja Laboral or Laboral Cucha. So they created their own bank. And what did that bank do? Its principal aim was to lend money to start up cooperatives. And R&D centres, innovation has always been, from the beginning to today, as you can see in that high-tech video, from the beginning to today, they have always wanted to be on the cutting edge of the work that they do. So they are forever innovating. 15 innovation centres, 15 research centres in Mondragón to keep them right at the tip-top competitive edge of their business. This is the organogram. This is a structure, the basic structure of governance of a cooperative. Every cooperative in Mondragón is governed like this, and many worker-owned cooperatives around the world are governed in something which is similar to this. Now, the first thing you have to notice here, and the most striking thing of all, especially when you realize it actually happens, right, is that the top of the tree is the general. Where is the manager? Where's the CEO? General manager. Top of the tree is the General Assembly. It's the General Assembly of workers, all of whom are owners, all the worker owners, General Assembly that take the decisions. The first decisions that they take is to elect a governing council and a social council. So we haven't got to the bosses yet, okay? So they're electing a governing council, and the governing council are delegated the responsibility by the General Assembly to choose a managing director. The General Assembly also elects and delegates power to a social council. And the social council takes care of the social needs of the workers in a cooperative. We might think of that as a union type role, okay? They defend the rights of cooperative members in that sense. So you have a social council, a governing council. The governing council chooses the managing director. Once the managing director is chosen, then the managing director is able to elect a management council which consists of whatever number of managers is necessary for the business. So, you know, it's the other way around. Everything's inverted in Mondragón, all right? Right at the top, you've got humanity, you've got the people. And what supports the humanity and the people is the manager. And if you want to look at it in terms of money, where's the money? Where's the financial capital? The financial capital isn't at the top of the pyramid. The financial capital is supporting the humanity. Okay, so things are inverted. Now, one thing that we have to bear in mind here, and this is the most difficult thing, I think, actually, on reflection, is that we live in a world, and this was mentioned by our introductory speakers, we live in a world where everything has to be done like quick, quick, quick. It's got to be done tomorrow. You know, it's got to be done in 3 years or 4 years or in 6 months, right? But in Mondragón, it took them 13 years before they created the first cooperative in 1956. So what were they doing for 13 years, you may ask? Well, what they were doing was education. They created the Escuela Profesional, a technical college, which today is the Mondragón University. They created that technical college, and they educated the population for 13 whole years before they created the very first cooperative. In other words, they realized, well, Jose Maria Lloreta realized that you can't just leap into it. If you want this to be sustainable, if you want it to be resilient, if you want it to last, if you want it to truly empower people to be worker owners, to be their own managers of their own lives, to change their entire way of thinking about business, if you want that, you need time to educate them. And that is why in Mondragón, then and today, and in Preston, we're very focused on education of all sorts, of all different kinds. Now, one of the things that has impressed us in the contemporary world of trying to develop a cooperative society, cooperative communities, is the example of the anchor institutions of Cleveland, Ohio in the USA. In Cleveland, Ohio, where you have the so-called evergreen cooperatives, there's one aspect of that cooperative organization which they didn't look at in Mondragón, and that is the aspect of the anchor institutions. And this is something that we've been developing in Preston with great success. I'll talk about that a bit later. So we'll have a look at Ted Howard, the director of the Democracy Collaborative, who created the Evergreen Cooperatives, talking to us about anchor institutions.
Like many American cities, Cleveland was once a center for industry and good jobs. But the factories closed up or moved away and took the jobs with them. Today, over half the children in Cleveland live below the poverty line. Without jobs, poor neighborhoods get poorer, and disinvestment, lack of educational opportunity, and barriers to employment compound themselves. How can we bring jobs back to cities like Cleveland and keep them there? We need to work with what we've got, and a city like Cleveland has got a lot of world-class hospitals and universities. These are anchor institutions, large, non-profit institutions which are anchored to the city and very unlikely to move away. These anchors are the economic powerhouses of the city, spending billions of dollars every year on the goods and services they use every day. But a lot of that money is spent far outside the city. How can we use the billions of dollars anchors already spend to help lift neighboring communities out of poverty? The Cleveland model points toward a solution. Anchor institutions want to make their operations more sustainable, and this is an opportunity to create new local businesses to fill these new needs. But we need to make sure that these businesses stay rooted in the communities that need the jobs the most. In the Cleveland model, these businesses are worker cooperatives, owned by their own workers. Each worker owner has an equal share and a voice in the way the company is run. Democratic control of the company keeps jobs local. It's hard to imagine the workers at a company voting to eliminate their own jobs because it'd be cheaper to hire lower-paid employees somewhere else. And democratic ownership of the company keeps the profits local too. Rather than flowing out of the city to an owner in the suburbs or to some big corporation's offshore bank account, the wealth generated by the business is distributed broadly to the community members whose work makes that wealth possible. Keeping wealth local means that more people can buy more things in the community, which creates more jobs and builds more wealth. The anchor institutions buy things like clean power and local produce from the cooperatives. This was money they needed to spend anyway, but now they not only get the sustainable goods and services they need, they are also helping build jobs in their neighboring communities. And when the cooperatives have long-term contracts to supply major local institutions, they can be more certain that their businesses will thrive. They can even take these contracts to the bank if they need credit to help their business grow. It's a win-win situation. These cooperatives themselves cooperate. They are linked together by a larger nonprofit. The worker owners promise never to sell their company to make a quick buck, and in return, the nonprofit helps their cooperative business succeed, providing technical assistance and strategic guidance. The nonprofit also operates a revolving loan fund which channels investment from anchor institutions, local foundations, and government programs to the cooperatives. As the cooperatives thrive, they pay back into the revolving fund, which eventually provides the money to help launch yet new cooperatives, creating even more jobs. If it can work in Cleveland, it can work in your city. With cooperatives in Cleveland operating the nation's largest urban greenhouse and installing its largest urban solar field, people are paying attention. The Cleveland model is spreading, with worker co-ops connected to their local anchor institutions springing up in cities across the country.
Okay, so that is a little bit about the anchor institutions, and we'll be talking a bit more about that when I discuss the Preston model. Before we go on to the Preston model, just one more example, and this is the organization One Worker, One Vote, organized by someone called Michael Peck in Cincinnati in the United States. And the reason I'm giving you this example is because of the work that Michael Peck has done related to union co-ops. And there's a lot of information here about union co-ops, which we just haven't got time to go into. But there's one point I want to make about union co-ops, and that is what basically Michael Peck has done with union co-ops in the United States is he has replaced, if you remember that Mondragón governance structure, he's replaced the social council with a union committee so that the unions are directly involved in the structure and organization of the cooperatives. The rest of the cooperative organization is exactly the same as Mondragón: the General Assembly, the governing body, the manager, the management council, and so on. That's exactly the same. But instead of the social council, you have the union committee. Now, why is that so important? It's because this is an example of how, whether it's the United States, well, in this case, the United States, whether it's the United States, Preston, Italy, or Bermuda, things have to be adapted to the culture of the country. And in the United States, the presence and the history and the tradition of the unions is so important that there's no way you can really seriously get away with creating worker-owned cooperatives without union involvement. And in Preston, we're looking at that because we also, in Great Britain, we have a strong tradition of union involvement with workers' rights and so on. So we're also looking at that model. Of course, the point is that in Mondragón, there are no unions. Unions don't exist in Mondragón. And when I first learned that, basically I didn't believe it. Say, hey, you know, how's that possible? And the point is, in the Mondragón model, they've been going at it for so long, and it's so developed, that imagine the workers are dissatisfied with an aspect of their work. Well, who are they going to complain to? They're the owners, right? So there's no way you're going to sort of complain to yourself. You've just got to get on with it and find a solution in the General Assembly. So that's how that works, and that's why the union question is an important one. Okay, so I'm going to go on now to talk to you about the Preston model, which is a subject very close to my heart. I work in the University of Central Lancashire, which is bang in the middle of Preston, and I'm proud to say and pleased to say that the university is slowly, because universities go very slowly, or at least they do where I come from, slowly but surely becoming a player in the community as opposed to an ivory tower. So this is great news for me. It forms a large part of the work that I'm involved in. So what is the Preston model? We've got a little extract which explains that to you.
So what is the Preston model? In a nutshell, It's a set of policies and priorities designed to keep and build wealth within a designated area by emphasizing local investment and procurement. Anchor institutions such as universities, housing associations, and hospitals commit to purchase goods and services locally, including from worker-owned co-ops, to spread wealth and provide more, better employment. And local government supports those efforts by investing its budget and public pension funds in local financial institutions and credit unions. Additional revenue to pay for public services and housing and more investment comes through public ownership of productive utilities like communications or green energy.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the Preston model, and I think it's important and interesting. I keep talking about context. As was mentioned before I started speaking, the whole cooperative movement began in Rochdale in 1844, and this is a very famous picture here of the so-called Rochdale pioneers. And we take a lot of inspiration from that historically. It's very odd because, I mean, it is a history, because today I've been invited to Rochdale to talk to them about cooperatives, and they themselves were raising their eyebrows that there's someone from Preston coming to Rochdale to tell them about cooperatives when they themselves invented cooperatives, but that's history for you. I just want to point out that Rochdale, down there on the right, is just 1 hour's drive to Preston. So maybe there's something in our culture in the northwest of England that makes this kind of thing possible. This is something which is in the back of our minds and is kind of like interesting for us to think about. Now, when we're talking about Preston, we can think about its industrial past, and we're going to think about its future as well, and the reasons why we started creating this Preston model. In the industrial past of Preston, Preston was basically a mill town, creating textiles and cotton in these great big factories here. You can see in the picture these big chimneys are all over places like Preston and the surrounding area. And although employment was gained by the Industrial Revolution, and in Preston people had employment through the cotton mills, the work was pretty inhuman and really hard and really tough. And in order to sort of get by the day, a lot of the workers in the mills invented songs, created songs to try and get them through the day, which also described the difficulties that they had in their jobs. As you can see, if you can read that, those lyrics, they say things like, "Poverty, poverty, knock, my loom for weaving, my loom is saying all day, poverty, poverty, knock, gaffers too skinny to pay. Poverty, poverty, knock, keeping one eye on the clock. I know I can guttle when I hear my shuttle go, poverty, poverty, knock. Every morning at 5, I wonder that we keep alive, tired and yawning, another cold morning. It's back to the dreary old dive." And we're going to listen to an extract from that song right now. Thank you.
And it's poverty, poverty, knock. Me loom it is saying all day. Poverty, poverty, knock. Gaffers too skinny to pay. Poverty, poverty, knock. Allus one eye on the clock, and I know I can guttle when I hear me shuttle go, poverty, poverty, knock. Thank you.
Okay, so that was the past. Okay, so what about the future? Well, in 2011, Preston was working like all other places in the Western capitalist world and seeking inward investment. Inward investment was what it was all about. If you could get the retailers, the big shops to come in, if you get people to invest in the local community, then you're away, because with investment comes employment and so on and so forth. And this is an artist's impression of the inward investment project for urban regeneration for Preston in 2011. after working at this for 8-9 years, okay? And what happened in 2011 was that was so close to the financial crash at the end of 2008 that this whole project collapsed. There was nothing left, nothing at all. The inward investment, the project had completely failed. The investors drew back because of the financial crash, and they just left a big black hole. That's all we had in Preston. We had absolutely nothing. The industrial past was the industrial past, and it wasn't that great anyway. It was the reason the Rochdale pioneers created cooperatives was because of that dreadful industrial past. And we had a future, and we didn't have that future anymore. So we just had this great black hole. So this was the moment when people in Preston said, that's it. We've got to do something. We just can't just sit here, right? Something has to be done. And something has been done. And it's been so successful that it's captured media attention in the United Kingdom to a surprising degree. And they're even calling it things like Corbynomics. Corbynomics is a word that's been created around the name of the leader of the opposition party, the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, Jeremy Corbyn, because Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party have now adopted a few of the principles of the Preston model. So it's gone from Preston to become almost national policy. And this is why, within a period of a few years, it says 2015 there, but it's really from round about 2014, 13, 14, to the present day, Preston, according to all economic indicators, is the most improving town, the biggest growing town in the United Kingdom. That's Preston on the bottom there. And not only is it the fastest growing town in the United Kingdom, only after 5 years of work with the Preston model, not only is it the biggest one, but look by how much. It's like way ahead, way ahead. This is from an independent think tank. I didn't invent it myself, by the way. So the anchor institutions are largely responsible for this initial success. This is what happened in Preston as a result of the work we did with the anchor institutions. Now, just to reiterate what Ted Howard was saying about the anchor institutions in Cleveland and how we've done it here, anchor institutions are the big institutions in a town or city or community that are big spenders. They're big spenders on the one hand, and on the other hand, they are anchored in community. They're not going anywhere. And they're not going anywhere even if there are bad economic times. So, for example, the university, I'd say to myself, that's not going anywhere. The hospital, the local authority, the police, these are anchor institutions that are going to stay there, and they spend a lot of money. And what we did in Preston is we went to the procurement officers, to the senior leaders of these anchor institutions, and we worked with them to see if they could possibly spend more money locally. Instead of spending it in London, right, the capital, which is miles away from Preston, we said, look, couldn't you, instead of spending it there, couldn't you spend some of that money in Preston? And at first, we got laughed at by these people. You know, what are you coming here to talking to us about that for, and so on and so forth. Others couldn't be bothered, and it was difficult, you know, but little by little they began to listen. They began to have a feeling of social responsibility. They began to be ignited in their interest about what it means to them as procurement officers in a place like Preston to be able to do this, to be able to offer something to the town. And little by little, they increased their spending in Preston. And they increased it big time. So in the top graphic there, you can see that the anchor institutions increased their total spend from, in 2012 to 13, from 5% in Preston to 18.2%. And that's big money for Preston. That's £75,000 increase in the space of 5 years in Preston itself. And in the local area, the Lancashire region area, the spend from anchor institutions was increased from 39% to nearly 80%. And that is a completely stunning turnaround for the fortunes of Preston, talking there about nearly 200 million pounds. So that's obviously the reason. That's why Preston is the fastest growing, most improved city in the UK. And it was done by establishing relationships, establishing trust, talking to people, getting the anchor institutions to become part of our community and to become part of something together. That's how it was done. They didn't have to do it, but they did. I'm going to skip this slide here. I put this slide here to just demonstrate that there's a lot of thinking going on behind here. It's not easy, and we've developed steps to try and develop the relationship with the anchor institutions in order to do that. Now, another reason that this has succeeded is leadership. It's important to have leadership. Everything's important, and leadership is also important. In our case, we had an inspired leader of the city council, but he wasn't leader when he started, he's leader of the city council now, and he was able to drive, with his vitality and energy, to drive this forward. So this is Matthew Brown, my friend and colleague, and co-director of the Preston Co-operative Development Network.
I think we're getting into a debate about how we can really transform local economies and have richer communities, and this debate's taking place in this country but also overseas and in Canada as well. Previous to the Preston model of community wealth building, we tended to do what a lot of areas did. So we'd try to bring in inward investment. That was probably one of the main strands of what we were trying to achieve, improve skills. So we weren't really getting into the conversation very deeply about how to bring about systemic change. And obviously since 2011, when we were planning some quite major inward investment with the Tide Bond regeneration scheme, we had to think again, because basically we had a situation in which obviously government's cutting back, and also big business might not always be that interested in small cities like Preston, more attracted to central London and places like that. The principles are trying to keep wealth in the community, trying to create wealth as well within the community, and trying to work across a number of partners, mainly large public sector organisations, to build strategies where we have more democratic and resilient economies. What it looks like on the ground is that each of the anchor institutions have shifted the culture. So ourselves as a council, we're not particularly big, so we really bring this to scale if we're working across Preston with a number of organisations. So we've changed the culture to raise wage levels, to purchase locally, to invest locally, and to look at other ways to create more democratic economies, especially around trying to get involved in a cooperative bank within Lancashire, which we're leading on, but also expanding the cooperative economy and looking at investing locally through our pension funds. What that looks like on the ground is there's been £75 million that was brought back to Preston in 2016-17, and that has been repatriated to lots of local businesses here. So say, for example, our markets, which is a project that's worth around £5 million, about 80% of that went to local companies. We went around the other public sector bodies like the county council and the police and the colleges that we have here, and we tried to persuade them of the merits of getting involved in that. So that was some of the work in the first instance. And then after that, we got into this situation in which we changed the culture, especially through procurement. So it wasn't just about looking at price and quality, it was about looking at social value, raising wage levels, supporting local businesses, expanding the social economy. So we got them into that mindset. Community involvement, well, the trade unions and the churches and the religious sector and the voluntary sector have been very supportive of it. So we got the community involved in that respect. In some ways, this has now become very self-sufficient. So each of the public sector organisations involved, now they're very much doing things in their own way, and they're very much inspiring us by what they're doing. So say, for example, Lancashire Constabulary, they're looking to insource some of the contracts back into the public sector. They're paying a real living wage. They're doing stuff around equality and diversity. They're encouraging trade union recognition in the contracts that they do when they go out to tender. Community Gateway, that's insourced works back into the housing cooperative, and they're even employing local people, the tenants, through that process. So in many ways it's deepened and become quite successful. And then the university, they're working with us to expand the cooperative economy. So where there's gaps in the local procurement market, they're looking at forming worker-owned businesses, which is a big part of what we're trying to achieve. What we need to do a lot more of to actually engage with people locally is the statistics, which are showing, for example, the amount of jobs we have in the local economy, the employment rate, which is now very good, way above the Northwest and the UK, but also the wage levels, especially for people who work within the local authority. So people receiving the living wage are better. Traditionally, we're a deprived area in Preston. We're now the best out of 14 council areas in Lancashire. Also, wages for part-time employees were the best out of 14 council areas in Lancashire as well. And I think these policies have helped a huge amount. We're really lifting people up, which is really positive. What we're doing is we're looking to spread these ideas across the UK, and we're getting interest from about 50, 60 different sources, which includes the Welsh Assembly, Welsh Water, the Confederation of Social Housing in Wales, a lot of London councils, at least 6 or 7, including some of the mayors that are interested, Birmingham, and the Scottish Government, which has it in its legislative programme. So this is becoming quite a big movement. And what's fascinating is these economic responses are exactly the same, or pretty much the same, in British cities as they are in American cities. So you go to Cleveland or Rochester or Detroit, and the kind of policies they're introducing, advocating around anchor institutions and local banking and energy democracy and assets, keeping the wealth of assets in the community, they're exactly the same. In other authorities, in other places, people tend to frown on new ideas, and I think what people need to do is realise the depth of the problem, because if you look at the outcomes we're getting across the economy in terms of inequality and life expectancy and things like that, we're here to really represent the interests of those people, and to do that we need to do something that's going to be quite substantial, and we can't be skirting around the edges. So I just say take a bit of inspiration from what's happening in Preston, in Cleveland, in Barcelona, in other places, and just try to stick at it, because eventually you will win people over. At first they might feel what you're saying is a bit challenging, but you will eventually win people over.
This is simply to emphasise that the person we saw speaking is the leader of Preston City Council. So in terms of political weight, apparently he doesn't have very much. He's just the leader of the council of a medium-sized city in the UK. But what's happened with the Preston model is that it's captured the interest of the Labour Party, the national party of opposition in the United Kingdom. And as a result of that, we've had ministers visiting Preston, which they've never used to visit, but they do now, visiting Preston, coming to the university, being interested in what we have to say, and then we have been invited in Preston to participate in the Labour Party's Community Wealth Building Unit, and therefore we are now directly inputting into Labour Party policy, which will become a policy in the next manifesto for the next general election. And therefore, if Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, is voted in as the Prime Minister next time round, the policies of the Preston model, including in particular, on the one hand, anchor institutions, and on the other hand, worker-owned cooperatives, will become national policy. Oops. Now, where do the worker-owned cooperatives come in the Preston model? If you think about the situation of the anchor institutions increasing their local spend, there came a time when the anchor institutions were saying to us, look, we've done our best, and indeed they have. They've increased their local spending. But now there's no more. There's no one in Preston to sell us any more stuff. We can't increase our local spending because that's it. We've done it as much as we can. And so what we said is, hey, you know what? That's a gap in the local economy. That's a gap in the local economy. If we could fill that gap, if we could create businesses that filled the gap in the local economy, then the anchor institutions could carry on buying, couldn't they? Okay? And so we identified the gap in the local economy and we decided we would fill that gap. But we wouldn't fill it with any old business. This time, we'd make sure we fill that economic gap with worker-owned cooperatives so that it would serve the function of increasing local wealth, but it would do it ethically and fairly, and it would increase other aspects which are interesting to us in terms of society, such as democracy, participation, citizenship, pride of place, and all of those things. So we'd, if you like, kill several birds with one stone. Increase the local wealth, but also start that transforming function of cooperatives for our communities to become proud of their communities and vital and energetic agents in their communities and transform the city socially as well as economically. So the first thing we did was to create this, the Preston Co-operative Development Network, inspired by the Mondragón Cooperative Corporation. If you think back to that table with the legs, okay, the tabletop, the Mondragón Cooperative Corporation, well, this is our version of it, the Preston Cooperative Development Network. That's the tabletop that is going to network all the cooperatives together. So this was constituted, legally constituted last year, and that's some of the directors, me and Matthew Brown included, signing the legal documents to constitute that Preston Cooperative Development Network. And we've been trying to sort of compare it and model it to the Mondragón model. We've been identifying the entities that are businesses or cooperatives or who work to cooperative principles, and we've been joining and linking them together. We've been developing the legs of the table. We have a credit union. We are now creating a cooperative bank, just like they did in Mondragón, because in the UK, the big banks will not lend money to any startup business, never mind a weird cooperative business. So we're creating our own bank. And the universities become a big player, of course, in the education aspect of it. So where you've got that gap, that purple square, that gap in the local economy, the anchor institutions are wanting to spend but cannot. So the university and other plans we have for a cooperative education centre, the university is creating graduates who will fill that gap with worker-owned cooperatives. There are different things we can do. We also are interested in companies being bought out by their employees. So a manager or an owner of a company is going to retire or wants to sell the business. We want to give an option to the workers of that business to buy the business off the manager. And we're working with Cooperatives UK, who've created this brochure called Simply Buyout, explains how that can be done. And the Labour Party are considering the option of making it Labour Party policy and therefore potentially national policy to give the workers of companies in that situation #1 option for buying out the company. The university, dear to my heart obviously, is developing several strands of cooperative education at undergraduate level, graduate level, postgraduate, and then the world of work in Preston. We used to have a problem in Preston with graduates who spent 3 years, undergraduates who spent 3 years in the university being trained, being highly skilled, and then leaving the university, wanting to stay in Preston, but having no job opportunities in Preston, nothing for them there. So what do? Off they go to the bigger cities, such as London or Manchester. So we want them to stay, and Preston wants them to stay, and they want to stay. So we're all getting together to make sure we can create business plans for worker-owned cooperatives for those students to understand what cooperatives are, get a business plan, go to our business hub called Propeller, and make sure they get incubation areas in Propeller, the business hub. And then when they move out of the university, then they can go from the business hub Propeller in the university to the Preston Co-operative Development Network. They can be supported all the way. The council can help them with premises, give them premises in town, and be supported so that those first 2 years of a business, which are the critical years of any startup business, the first 2 years of that business are supported all the way. First by the Propeller, the business hub, second by the Preston Co-operative Development Network, and third by continuing support from the council and the university to make sure that those businesses, they thrive in the centre of Preston. They thrive, and they do all the things we want them to do in terms of community wealth building and also in terms of social transformation for Preston. So I think that this final slide here gives a sort of overview of what we're looking for. And I always like to emphasize, yeah, it's about money. Sure, it's an economic model. We do want wealth increased in Preston, and we want that wealth retained in Preston, and we want that wealth to create jobs in Preston. We want all of those things, and we're succeeding in those things, but we want to do it in a cooperative way so that we can transform the social element of what's going on. This is completely critical to what we do, and very often people forget that it's as much about the social element as it is about the economic element. Of course, they're joined, but they're both equally important. So these things, democracy, ownership, cooperation, equity, social transformation, people and employment, education, equality, all of those things are things that we want to generate in Preston, along with the community wealth. So, thank you, and let's hope it continues blooming, and I very much hope that this is useful for the BEDC and any of you who are interested in developing community, developing businesses here in Hamilton and in Bermuda in general. It'd be a wonderful thing for me to feel that was going to be useful to you in that way, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Manley. That was a fantastic presentation. We look forward to taking receipt of that. Certainly it's, as I felt, I know it's worth going through again and again. There was so many interesting elements to it, all the linkages, relationships, agreements, and certainly all the understandings between the network institutions. Incredible. At this time, we're going to open up for Q&A. Please feel free. We've got a few mics here and whatnot. If I can have one or two of my colleagues that kind of beat it to be able to move mics around. Erika's already over there. Plenty of food at the back. We've got the beans. We've got the beans at the back. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Bean, for handling the food. Let's give them a hand, ladies and gents. And I kind of saved her for last. I know she wants to hide up there. Everyone just turn. Yep, just turn and look at Selena up there. Selena, don't hide behind the laptop. Come forward. She's been an amazing resource, ladies and gents. All this admin support, everything. And she's been the one up there kind of, obviously, just toggling back and forth between Dr. Preston's presentations. Really, really kind of intense video, so, to be seamless and whatnot, no buffering. That's the way that we just decided to do it. So plenty of food at the back, the restrooms over to the right. Question number 1. Yep, Cordell.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Manley, for your presentation. The one question I have is, how easy was it to open up a bank? And where did you put who was your banker? Because that's one of the challenges. If you have a co-op type of bank, you still have to use the major bank. So they're still getting a cut out of it. So how easy was that done?
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. No, that's a great question, and I guess you suspect it wasn't easy. Well, you're right. And we haven't quite got there yet. We're in development, right? So we're in development with a guy from the RSA, the Royal Society of Arts and Commerce in the UK, a guy called Tony Greenham, who is an ex-banker and who knows the ins and outs of banking. And he's able to help us, to give us advice on how to proceed. And there are different, one of the principal difficulties is investing in the bank, getting enough money to make the bank viable. One of the ways we're doing this with the council is to reinvest pension funds. Take away the investment from, say, fossil fuels and things of that nature, and persuade people that it's worthwhile investing pension funds in, for example, to create the basis of the bank. And another thing that we're doing is we're talking to the anchor institutions, because the anchor institutions began as being completely isolated and individual institutions with no interest whatsoever in banking, but now they are themselves a network of institutions, and we're saying to them, look, this is good for the whole Preston model thing. Maybe you can also invest in the cooperative bank, and things are looking good. Things are looking up, and we hope to have the bank up and running by the end of 2019. As a matter of fact, we may even have 2 banks running. We're also working on a community bank, which is a slightly different model, but is also much more beneficial potentially than relying on the big banks. So no, it's not easy, but it's easier now than it would have been 10 years ago. Partly because the law's changed, okay, so that's one thing, but mostly because we've got momentum. We're on our way, you know, the wheels are turning, and so people see it. So when we say now to people, cooperative bank, you know, instead of saying, whoa, they're saying, oh, yeah, okay, maybe, so how are we going to do it? So people are ready to work, and we're motivated, and we're rolling, we've got momentum, and we've got ideas, and it's going to happen, you know? So that's the situation with the bank, yeah.
Loud. My question is about legal structures and whether you've been able to accomplish all this within traditional corporate legal structures, or how much social enterprise enabling legal structures have assisted you.
About legal structures.
So I think they're called CICs. CICs, yeah.
Okay, community interest companies.
Yeah.
Legally, it's actually the most common legal structure for a cooperative is in the UK what's called a cooperative society. And there are many different ways of setting up cooperatives. You can even set up a limited company, but have the governance created as a cooperative. The basic difference between a social enterprise and a cooperative, the kind of cooperative we're talking about anyway, a worker-owned cooperative, is that the worker-owned cooperative has autonomy and is empowered to do exactly what they want with the profits. They may not call it profits, they may call it surplus, but basically it's profits. They can do what they want with it. A community interest company, for example, cannot do that. They are restricted. They are obliged by law to spend their money back into whatever they define to be their community good. So the cooperative is a much more flexible, business-like approach. But of course, although it's a business, they're governed by the cooperative principles. So from our point of view, from our perspective, the worker-owned cooperative has the best of both worlds. Plus, it does that amazing thing of empowering the worker owners, empowering people, giving people status, agency. They can do what they like. They can do it, and that's what they do. So I hope that half answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Manley. We got Glenn and Madam Minister.
Yes, Dr. Manley, if you would comment a little more on the role of Mondragón, the context of it starting, from what you're given a history, it sounded like it started in the midst of probably its worst experience of fascism in Spain. And just to give a context to the role, and if I understand you correctly, that the role of the cooperative movement was not only economic, but was also socially transformative. And that the Mondragón example, and I think in Barcelona, would Barcelona be another enclave that has cooperatives? And its iconic Barcelona football team is based on cooperative structure?
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a great question. It would take another whole presentation to really get into that. But the roots of the Mondragón experience is in the Catholic religion, an interpretation of Catholicism which said it's not enough to go to church, you've got to do good in society. Now, that was a great advantage for Father José María Arizmendireta and the people in Mondragón, because what they had was faith. And therefore, they were prepared to meet any obstacle to do this. And they took it for granted that their faith was their life, and they took it for granted that would be how they would create work in the future community. Another aspect which is both disadvantage and advantage was the fact that they had nothing left. They had nothing at all. After the Spanish Civil War, there was nothing. Not only that, the Basque country in the north of Spain is a separatist region, so they were even more hated by the fascists. And it was only a Catholic priest like Arizmendireta who was able to transcend the politics. So he was not a fascist, but he was not a communist either. He was a religious person, so he could be sort of seen to be neutral. And that's the way he weaved himself into a position of being able to create this society even when the fascist state was there in Spain. So although at first sight that seems incredible, if you sort of take a step back and think about it, you can see how he managed to do it. Ironically, in fascist Spain, the Catholic Church was very close to the fascist regime in those days. So therefore, as a priest, he had almost, not quite, almost a free hand to develop that. So that's how that works.
Thank you, Glenn. Just before, Madam Minister, car 02551. Your lights are on. Been on for some time. 02551. Yes, Madam Minister.
Okay. What comes to mind for me is some of the informal economies when you look in places like China and Africa, where you have great poverty, but yet you have had people within those communities who have been able to come together, women in particular, especially women's groups, who have been able to come together and establish an economic base through the collective efforts. What I was wondering, what are some, if you know anything about that, what are some of the initiatives, if you will, that help them to further formalize that and make it an even better economic model? Because such types of organizations have been able to help build schools and the like. And in looking at a small community like Bermuda, where you have quite a formal structure, even though we may not have many economic pillars, an entity like that trying to establish itself, would there be similar, like, I guess, if you will, issues that come to the fore in getting them to embed themselves into the community and become a stronger entity and be able to establish themselves? And I don't know, can you give any sort of information regarding that?
Yeah, I think that unlike a regular business, to create cooperatives, you have to have some other element. So we mentioned in Mondragón, you had the Catholic element. The cooperative organizations in Italy, that's another hotspot for cooperatives. they're organized in a different way. So in Italy, the cooperative businesses tend to be family businesses. So that's the way they build their trust and their bonding through family businesses. So I think it's necessary to have, and in the United States with Michael Pegg, it's the union, the solidarity of the unions that provides that kind of cooperation. So there's some cooperative taken for grantedness in the way they begin. The family, the religion, the union, the solidarity of workers. Wherever you get that kind of thing, you've got the beginnings, the basis of beginning cooperatives. However, what they've seen in Mondragón is that that's not enough to make it sustainable, right? So the reason I've worked a lot with Mondragón was precisely because they were worried that that cohesion was fading away. Why was it fading away? Because the religious faith and zeal of 1950 in Spain, in the Basque Country, is not the same as today in 2018. So the younger cooperative members were starting to doubt whether they should work in this way. They were saying things like, well, why should I? Why should I work overtime on a Saturday for no extra pay? Now, the older people say, well, that's because you own the place. It's obvious, isn't it? But they wouldn't see it as being obvious because they'd lost those principles. And that's why in Mondragón they have a very rigid governance structure to ensure that even if some of that fades away, the governance structure keeps it intact. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Manley. Jonathan?
Hi, good evening. To begin with, I just want to commend the government. 11 years ago, when I was the leader of the BAMS Workers' Council, no one knew what workers' cooperatives or workers' councils were. So I'm really excited to see this initiative now. I just had two quick questions. You talked about workers' buyout. Why can't workers just seize the means of production during a strike, like when Belco was on strike earlier? Why not just take that over and make it a workers' co-op? And secondly, how do we... One thing, it's great to see workers' cooperatives and the workers are no longer being exploited by a boss and capitalists, but they then become their self-exploiters. How do we transcend this kind of cooperative capitalism and move it to a wider participatory economy and participatory politics and just get rid of capitalism altogether? Thank you.
All righty.
Okay.
Cheers.
I'm not sure if I can answer those points, but they were certainly very well made. Thank you. I do think that this is about social transformation. I don't think the worker owners self-exploit. I think they take away exploitation, and they join in confidence and newly developed relationships. They engage in a different knowledge of what it is to be human, which is what I try to emphasize, you know, and they develop themselves as human beings, and they sacrifice. I think the word they would use is not exploitation. The word they would use, and they do use, is sacrifice. They are prepared to sacrifice some of their own comfort for the common good. There are concrete examples of this. So, for example, recently one of the big cooperatives in Mondragón actually collapsed. But in a sort of pure capitalist system, those workers would simply be unemployed, end of. But in the Mondragón system, different cooperatives made big sacrifices to accept the workers from the bankrupt cooperative. They accepted them in as new members of their cooperatives. And some of the cooperatives made big sacrifices to allow that to happen. So they, for example, they agreed not to have their Christmas bonus, or they agreed to go for 6 months with reduced salaries in order to create 1, 2, 3, 4 posts to save those workers from being unemployed. And the result of that is that unemployment in the cooperative sector in Mondragón simply doesn't exist. There is no unemployment. No, once you've got your job, if your cooperative is in trouble, you can go to another cooperative, and that's how they work together. And that's a fact. Amazingly enough, for those of us who kind of like don't necessarily think in that way. So it's very interesting, I think. Sacrifice, not exploitation.
That's really powerful. Thank you, Dr. Manley. Question right here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Dr. Manley. My question is Bermuda is continually selling off its resources. So how do we even begin to take this seriously when a good portion of our resources is either in foreign hands or under foreign contract? Like you said, green energy, but we've been around and around the moat on green energy for a while, and we haven't really gotten anywhere with that. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, of course, it's very difficult for me to comment on Bermuda. I certainly not in this or with this audience. I'm not going to say too much about Bermuda. But what I can say is that a lot of people said that it was impossible in Preston as well. Yeah. And it was impossible because the business world in the UK is actually governed by big corporations that are global corporations. And how could you compete with that? How could you compete with it? Well, we found a very interesting way of competing with that. What we did with the anchor institutions is we said, look, instead of giving a massive tender, for example, the estates management out for tender and seeing who competes, because nobody can compete with the big corporations, instead of doing that, why don't you chop it up into little bits and see if they can compete? And what happens when you chop up a big tender into little bits? Then the corporations are at disadvantage, because then they have to tender for each little bit instead of the big slice of the cake. So then what happened? The smaller businesses in Preston started to be able to compete for the small tenders and increase local wealth in that way. So, you know, what was seen to be impossible in Preston became possible. Now, I don't know how much of that is relevant to Bermuda, but I do think that more things are possible than we imagine. And this is why, you know, I really commend the work of the BEDC, because what I can see is creativity there, is a desire to do things, to move, to change, and you know, it's very exciting for me to see that happening. And I would like to see, you know, what are the ways that you can create things which you thought were not possible before. That would be really exciting.
Absolutely.
In the Preston model, you said that the Labour Party was involved. The same way with our government. Would our government, let's say we use some of the Preston model, would our government be part of it, or would it be an outside entity? Would it be the General Assembly? How would it be? A board of director? Which one?
I think that, as I said before, each place has to adapt the principles to the realities of the place. I think it's important to recognize that although the Labour Party in opposition is now involved in some of those principles arising from the Preston model, they were nowhere to be seen when this started. They only came along later on. So it's very important to feel that this stuff is autonomous. The place has been empowered. It's only at a later date that the Labour Party came in and saw it was good and could be interesting for them. So it was that follows a cooperative principle, right, of turning the pyramid the other way around. It begins small, it begins with empowerment in the place, and then it spreads out. Not it's a policy which is then placed into another place.
Thank you. We've got a question here at the back. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, we got John first, and then Ayo. Yeah, John.
Who?
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
You know, that was a great question. That leads right to what I was going to say. In respect to Bermuda being out here 600 miles off the U.S. coast.
Speaking to the mic, John, sorry. Yeah.
In respect to Bermuda being out here 600 miles off the U.S. coast, the whole world is now focusing on climate change. And I realize that from a technical perspective, most people are looking at how we can invent, blockchain and all that sort of stuff. But what I see is in Bermuda, we need to create, number one, some seawalls and other products that can stop the ocean from running over us. And on the second part, I see that we need to build some community-sized vertical farms, which would, number one, provide us with fresh produce and fresh vegetables every week, and will guarantee us to have some food should the world continue to get shorter and shorter in terms of providing food for everybody. So as a community, I believe that would be one of the positives that come out of this sort of plan.
Okay. Is that a comment, John, or is there a pointed question, or is that a comment?
Yeah, I was hoping everybody would look at it and think, does this make sense? And if it does, then we can use this model to try and put this plan together to save ourselves from the ocean and at the same time feed ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Dr. Manley, did you ever come back to that?
I could just comment on the feeding ourselves thing. Like in the UK with Brexit, I don't know how many of you are aware that the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, and they're talking about, well, hey, how are we going to feed ourselves, right? We're no longer going to get any food from Europe. We don't have any trade deals with anywhere else in the world. We gave up on the Commonwealth years ago. We're all going to starve. And so, people are rethinking agriculture, questioning industrial agriculture, and considering the possibilities of returning to more traditional methods of growing stuff on a smaller scale. And small-scale growth, local small-scale growth, is just the right kind of thing for cooperatives. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Question?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about the potential for this in Bermuda and how it might change the sort of power dynamics in a very small community. I don't know how small Preston is, but it's bigger than Bermuda, right?
Twice the size.
So what's the size of Preston?
120,000.
Right, okay. So so my thoughts were like if a co-op in, let's say, St. George's on the east end of the island was doing business with an anchor institution, we are so much smaller, than the Preston model. Do you foresee, or have you seen examples where there's been tensions between the anchor institution and the community? Because that anchor institution, it'd be likely in this country, it would be like one buyer and, a handful of suppliers. That institution then is likely to have political power as well because of its economic impact within that community. What are your thoughts about that? And have you seen that kind of dynamic occur in any other place?
Okay, thanks for that question. I do think, first of all, I as I said before, I'm a little reluctant to say too much about the situation in Bermuda. The people who know about Bermuda are in this room and elsewhere in Bermuda. And it's important, I think, that the principles of this model, which you can see in Cleveland, Ohio, in Cincinnati, in Italy, in Mondragón and so on, Preston, that the principles should be adapted and molded to the situation in each place. So I think that's absolutely critical. I actually think it could be a fascinating experiment for Bermuda, simply because Bermuda it might have a smaller population than Preston, but nevertheless it's a nation. Bermuda is a whole, a single nation. One of the problems we have in Preston is that Preston, compared to the nation, is just a little dot. And, people have been saying, well, Is it right that you should do all this stuff in Preston? What about the other towns in the nation? Is this protectionism compared to other places in the UK, et cetera, et cetera? So all of that stuff, you don't have this, potentially at least, you don't have this issue in Bermuda, because you're not talking about a town, you're talking about the entire nation. And I think that's really exciting. I mean, you know, I don't know, I just think, well, how great would that be if we could have a whole nation contained in that way, following these principles and seeing where that goes. And as I said before, in terms of community, not just in terms of business, those things together. And I guess that you have anchor institutions here as well, who may, for example, purchase things abroad, in America or something, and maybe they could be persuaded to develop things here and buy things here. I don't know. But that's what we did in Preston. We said we persuaded the anchor institutions to buy local. And when they said they couldn't, we said, okay, we'll provide businesses who can. And, you know, I think maybe in Bermuda, as far as I can see in Bermuda, there's a great opportunity in green renewable energies, because you import a lot of fuel. We know that climate change is here. It's the perfect moment to develop green renewable energies with businesses. Why not do it with co-ops, for example?
Thank you, Dr. Manley. Follow-up question, Ayo, quickly? Yeah, before we go to Erika?
No, my question really is about the relation between the anchor institutions and the co-ops, because it seems to me that the anchors will have a lot of, you know, power within that local community, especially with a small community like this. I don't know if you've seen that anywhere else. That's what I'm trying to ask. Has there ever been a problem where an anchor institution has been exerting its power as a buyer in maybe political ways or inappropriate ways?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. You would have thought so, wouldn't you? I think the point about the anchor institutions that I'm referring to is that they tend to have already a vocational aspect to them, a community aspect to them. So the police are not an entirely privatized business. They have a role in the community. The hospital seeks to serve the community. The university isn't just a sort of quango out there. It has something to do with the university. So these anchor institutions, they already have some kind of stake in the community. And it's that sense of responsibility that maybe is what we've been tapping into. So power is maybe less important for those anchor institutions than the power that, say, Amazon.com might wield. Amazon.com, the opposite, aren't they? They care nothing about community. They fly in their products and they don't exist in community. In fact, they're virtual. So the massive difference between that and the power they might wield and anchor institutions, they're kind of like more solid and based institutions who care in one way or another about where they live and so on. I think that it's a different kind of power, yeah.
Thank you. Erika?
Good evening. I have a question on the training and education. You had mentioned it in Preston model. I think you said that it was either 5 years in or for the last 5 years you've been providing training. And there was another model that you spoke about earlier on where it was 13 years of training, I believe. And I see at the 10th cooperative principles on education as well. So I was just hoping that you might be able to expand a bit on maybe the strategy that you would use for the training and education and how it's been going in Preston.
Yeah. So as I said, in Mondragón, they created 13 years of technical college education in order to change people's minds and hearts and understanding of what it might be like to work in a different way. And in Preston, we're doing that, as I said, in the university. So we're introducing cooperative strands and modules in transdisciplinary modules throughout the university. So the history department would talk about the history of cooperatives. The business school would talk about governance, for example. in psychology, you might talk about teamwork and the psychodynamics of working together. So we have strands of education, cooperative education like that. We link the cooperative culture to the mission statement of the university about responsibility, democracy, common sense, working together. We try to find the links between what we already have and the principles. We have the business hub that does a practical work of creating business plans for cooperatives, moving into the town at a future date. And we have a couple of examples of those already. So, for example, we have a fine arts group in Preston who consist of fine arts graduates from the university who, had they not been provided premises to remain in Preston, would have gone off to London or Manchester, but now they're in Preston, and so they are giving back to Preston what they learnt in the university, and therefore they're developing not only a little bit of financial generation, but they're contributing to the art and culture of Preston, right? So those are examples there, but we're going to go further than that. What we're developing right now is a cooperative education centre in premises in Preston outside the university so that we can provide technical and apprenticeship type education for people who want to create co-ops as well. Because the university is maybe it's a little bit blue sky, maybe a certain kind of education. We also want to provide the hands-on, practical, pragmatic education to give people skills to do things in a practical way as well. So, we need bricklayers too. And we need the bricklayers to feel that they can become owners of their own business too. So that's what I'm personally working on right now, is a cooperative education centre for Preston. And we're doing that with a thing called the Cooperative College in Manchester, who will accredit the qualifications.
Okay, great. Moving on. Yes, ma'am. After you, I'm sorry, Harold, and then
I'm up,
ma'am. Thank you.
Harold Smith, retired, but it seems like a great idea. It seems like you're taking me into future, in the future and into space. But I'm old, and I have a few questions. One, is there any model in Pennsylvania? Because I heard you mention Cleveland, Ohio. Are there models is there any? That's the first question. Any models in Pennsylvania? When I think of this, I think back in the past. So I'm going to take you back in the past. When urban development was in the United States, it was better known later as Negro removal. And I see all those beautiful buildings, and that reminds me of urban development. So, and then it also reminds me of CDCs, Community Development Corporations. Can you tie in some of those links for me, or am I a dreamer or a vision?
Okay. Well, I can't really say about Pennsylvania, I'm afraid. All I know is that my friend and colleague Michael Peck is doing a lot of work in Cincinnati, and Ted Howard is doing a lot of work in Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, there are examples of cooperatives dotted around the United States, but I couldn't say much more than that. It's true that there have been plenty of so-called urban regeneration economic strategies in the past which have been applied to various different situations in so-called deprived areas throughout the UK and so on and so forth. And it's true that those strategies kind of run their course and then they fade away, and then someone comes up with a new idea and so on and so forth. But I think one of the main differences between those strategies of the past and this kind of strategy is that this kind of strategy is all about roots up. Unlike, you could say, the Cleveland model in Ohio. Because the Cleveland model, what they've done there is in a way more similar to previous projects. What they've done in Cleveland is they've got a group of, if you like, wise old white men with the power to increase patronage, and they've invented strategies and cooperative templates. They've brought the templates into Cleveland. They've decided what the cooperatives should be. They've put them there, and then they've said, right, who wants to come and join us, okay? Any disadvantaged people out there who want to come and join our cooperative, come on and join our cooperative. And those people have been gathered around to be part of a preconceived template designed by well-meaning, wise people with a bit of money. Now, the point about that is that those people who are workers in those cooperatives, they didn't create it. So they are not genuinely empowered. It was brought in for them in a kind of charitable way almost, right? Whereas in Preston, what we're doing, and it's tougher, right? And it's slower, but it's more authentic. We're beginning just right there with the ground roots. If people want to do it, we're creating the framework and structure for them to do it themselves, not us for them, themselves, so that's the way that people become truly empowered and committed and motivated and proud and developing. That's the way we think it will become resilient and sustainable. And that true ground roots empowerment, that I think is a significant difference between what we're doing and what some of the strategies of the past.
Yep, committed, motivated, and proud. Powerful, powerful words. We have a few more questions. Microphones? Yes, ma'am. Microphone? Yeah, Ray, coming to you right now. Yeah, certainly. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, my question is there a blueprint for people who would like to create?
Sorry.
Hi, is there a blueprint for?
So could you start again?
Is there a blueprint for people who are interested in creating a co-op? What resources are you going to leave behind when you leave Bermuda? Have you, I guess, spoken with BEDC and given them some paperwork and things that you can disseminate for those who are interested in creating a business plan or getting people together to continue this discussion after you should leave?
Yeah, I think that you're in luck here with the BEDC. I'll get that right one day. You're in luck with these guys because it's not all about the Preston model. There are other examples of good practice and working to principles and values which will need to be adapted to the Bermuda situation. And what these guys are doing, but of course, William, you're probably best placed to comment about this in a minute. What these guys are doing is learning about the different strategies and bringing it into their own planning in order to provide the kind of information and the kind of support that you're talking about. So I'm only too pleased to offer anything we have to offer, but I know they're already on that path.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Manley. So within the booklet that you have is almost like a one-on-one guide in START. There's plenty of URLs to be able to further research and increase your skills and knowledge. Also, if we turn to page 16, that we have, if you recall, Dr. Manley mentioned Michael Pack. So you'll see there, Michael Pack and his team of ecosystem developers. All those individuals from, certainly New York and Cincinnati. We're bringing in a 6-person collaborative ecosystem kind of network, if you will. And they will be on stage, venue to be decided, hopefully here, December 4th and 5th. So you don't want to miss that. Certainly all of Dr. Manley's knowledge that he shared, as far as PowerPoint, other material that you were going to get from him, certainly December 4th and 5th. And then after that, we will be holding intense kind of in-depth workshops, kind of small sessions with anyone that is looking to be able to develop any cooperative. Certainly business planning, financing, team organization, type of cooperative, member, owner, whether it's a hybrid, worker owner and whatnot. So all that is coming down the pipeline, and certainly we're open for business now to be able to help you develop any business that you might have. Yeah? Does that kind of summarize for you? Fantastic. Okay. Yes, and just to kind of put it out there right now, BDIC has increased its microloan. And many of you, some of you may have tapped into BDIC's $20,000 microloan for the benefit of your business. Us, BDIC, to you directly, no bank. We have increased that. Is it increased, Eureka? Yet done? Next couple of weeks? Next couple of weeks. So we're taking that up to $50,000, and so BDIC to you directly, $50,000. And so you'll see in the book here in terms of questions, capital, financing, and whatnot, that we think is a huge resource to you as you go about your cooperative deliberations. Okay? Yes, ma'am? Question over here.
Good evening. I want to thank the BDC for putting this event on. I found it very informative. I've been thinking along these lines for, I guess, the last 40 years, and I sort of live in a cooperative manner at the moment. Where I live, we own our properties, we own the land, we have a limited company that runs a lot of the facilities that we need to use. My question is, do any of your cooperatives use Bitcoin or own Bitcoin banks that they use to fund the infrastructures that are needed to run your facilities? And that's my question.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question. Could you say it again, please?
I'm sorry. Bitcoin, they have. I'm not sure what the right term is, but it's BitChain, or I don't know if I mean blockchain. I'm sorry, blockchain businesses. Do you have any of those in any of your cooperatives that you use to run your infrastructures? That was my question.
Okay. Well, the simple answer to that is no, we don't. We're very much focused on the generation of very localized businesses, and we don't have that kind of thing, no.
Okay. One last question? Are we good? Okay, we're switching up the agenda slightly. And now we're launching into just an overview. Dr. Manley also, within his toolbox, certainly and that's your PhD focus, is in social dreaming. So he's just going to give an overview now of what that is. Certainly, the relevancy for his work, and just talk a bit about what we did yesterday with the three focus groups, well, not focus groups, but with the three closed sessions of North Hamilton stakeholders. And then after that, we've got one or two people that we're just going to ask, that were participants within the session yesterday, just to be able to share their thoughts, just to kind of set up social dreaming in the hopes that when we get Dr. Manley back, you can move into fuller experiences for the wider body such as today. Is that good?
Do we have the summary?
No.
Okay, well, we haven't got much time to sort of talk about this very much, but just to give you a flavor of the kind of things that we like to do in order to generate different thinking, creative thinking. Yesterday, we had 3 social dreaming sessions with business, residents, and not-for-profit organizations from North Hamilton to try and understand the situation in North Hamilton and the kinds of things and dreams that we could create to change things in North Hamilton. And in order to do this, we decided to bring in this technique called social dreaming. And I think social dreaming is an example of the necessity to think out of the box. Because what do we normally do if we try to find out something about an area? We invite in the residents, and we have, what do? We have a debate, we have a chat, we have a focus group, that kind of thing. And then what happens when we do that kind of thing? Well, very often we get the same old answers because we thought about it before. And it's very difficult to make progress. And one of the reasons for that is because we've already thought about those things in our conscious, rational mind. So, hey, what if we tried to dig a bit deeper and bring other thoughts into the melting pot? So in social dreaming, people get together in a group and they share their dreams. Now, I don't mean their ambitions. I mean their real dreams, their nighttime dreams. And the idea of doing that is that, hey, you know, we all spend about 8 hours a night thinking. The point is we're asleep. And where does that thought go? It sometimes goes into your dreams. And what's the use of that? Well, we don't know because we don't use it. So this technique is a way of helping us to use that thinking that we all do at night, but we never bother to use. And why would that be important? Well, it's important because that kind of thinking is different to the rational, logical thinking that we do. For example, dreams are often image-based, language of images. They're often very affective, very emotional. So those emotional things, those things that really mean something to us, they're hidden away in our dreams. So if we can bring them out, then maybe we can use them in a more holistic thinking. That can easily be applied to cooperatives because the rational thinking behind business is all based on numbers, economics, productivity, and so on. But the thinking behind cooperatives is a little bit of that, but also a little bit of what we called before faith, or some unknown thing that we believe in: family, relationships, place, belonging. How do you talk about those things? Well, what we tried to do yesterday, and I thought it was a very interesting 3 sessions we had, was to ask people to give us their dreams and link those dreams up to the situation in the north of Hamilton. And I think we got some very interesting results beyond the normal stuff, like, oh, it's scary in North Hamilton, we don't want to walk there. You know, other stuff about the positive aspects of North Hamilton, and how understanding that, yeah, okay, on the one hand it's scary, but on the other hand there's good stuff there too, and we can feel emotionally attached to a place like North of Hamilton. If you join those things together, then those things together can create a more holistic and a more authentic understanding of what that place might mean for people. And on that basis, you can begin to develop cooperatives, because it's cooperatives that are based on that kind of understanding of place, that kind of understanding of relationships and teams and so on and so forth. So that's what we did yesterday. We were going to present you with some results in a kind of infographic form, but one, we've run out of time, and I think it's been incredible. You've been here for so long, very attentive as far as I can see. Thank you. And 2, we just didn't get that graphic up to speed on time. But William, you say that there are some members here who would like to make some comments?
There are a few, and I think I have set 1 or 2 up to be prepared to be able to just say a few words. And so some of you, all of you may know, certainly BDIC's work within the Economic Empowerment Zone, Somerset, North Hamilton, and certainly St. George's. And so with the whole introduction of cooperatives and certainly community development, it gives us, just new ideas, new creative energies to be able to look at North Hamilton with all its wonderful opportunities and just a beautiful collage of small businesses, but certainly its challenges as well. And we thought that Dr. Manley's social dreaming expertise could be turned in that way to be able to start to be able to look differently at what we've done, and certainly how can we go forward to be able to link all of our work together. And so the business group, the resident group, and certainly the nonprofit donor group, that was a fresh experience for us, gave us over 25 flip charts, of which we then kind of circled back and highlighted some common themes between the 3 separate groups. The first group was 9 to 11 o'clock in the morning, then from 12 noon to 2 o'clock, and then from 3 to 5 o'clock. So we have all that data, and as Dr. Manley mentioned, we'll be looking at it in a very different way. So Myra, Dr. Virgil, can I please put you on the spot? Dr. Virgil was a part, certainly I'm the executive director of the Bermuda Family Foundation. Thank you for coming out as a part of that last group.
I'm happy to come out.
Yeah.
But I do feel set up. Okay. So. Good evening, everyone. So I was part of the, I think the last group of the social dreaming experience. And frankly, none of us knew what to expect. And I think that even the initial setup was quite unusual because you're not sitting and talking to one person. You're asked to put your dreams and your energies and the wishes, in a sense, that you have for this community into the space. Right. So it sounds like, oh, okay, what is that going to be? And the difference between doing that and kind of saying, what are some ideas or some strategies that we can have for North Hamilton? It doesn't sound like that. Instead of saying things like, we hope and dream about this area being vibrant and safe, people talked about hearing kids laughing more on the streets and on the sidewalks, people playing basketball or roller skating in some of the areas that have been left and are just kind of abandoned. Abandoned homes, like the home on the house on Princess Street, gorgeous, gorgeous historical architecture. What could that be? Is that a food co-op? Are there areas where a gentleman, it was interesting, talked about vertical farming? What can we do about food, making it more affordable and having a kind of a shared ownership and lower cost for food, and what can we do for ourselves? So it doesn't sound as if it's sort of bang, bang, bang. These are the 10 things that we have to get done, and we've got to put lights up. There was talk about sort of community presence of police, but not policing, and that's a different field than sort of we want police officers walking the beat. So this idea of sort of if you've had dreams about what our community looks like, and talking about it in a colorful and creating a picture of what it looked like in your dream, that's very different than laying down kind of hard numbers. It may get to that. It clearly would get to that, but the idea was that we can, if we start with a dream and start with our imaginations and the need that's here, so you can imagine everybody kind of having ideas about what needs to be done versus what we might like to do, but what needs to be done, and then dreaming about what that could look like, and then putting a frame around it that's cooperative and that we all share in it. That was the difference.
Fantastic. You came prepared to say that, didn't you? Yes, you did. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tracy, can I come to you next? Can I give you a few minutes before I come to you at the back? Tracy, is there anyone? Tracy back there, yeah? 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 Can we share a few words? We've got Tracy back there. She was in the first session. And thank you so much for that, Dr. Virgil. So just while Tracy's getting the mic and collecting her thoughts, perhaps you can share the whole fantastic element, the whole, very different experience. The whole snowflake thing, I believe Dr. Virgil touched on that, I'm not sure. And also kind of the whole idea, what's behind not being able to come back or debate anyone's idea. It's just almost like a free flow of thought and feeling and emotion and dreams.
Yeah. I think that what William's talking about is, and what was touched upon already, is the idea that we're, how do you participate democratically in giving your feelings and thoughts about something? So, as a researcher in a university, I'm very, very used to, for example, conducting focus groups. And what happens in a focus group is that the people with status or authority, or the people who are viewed as being more intelligent or more educated than the other, they're the people who take over. And they give their views in a powerful way, and other people don't give their views, remain silent, or feel that their views are not listened to, etc. So what you do in social dreaming is you put the chairs in this so-called snowflake pattern, which means that the chairs are situated in such a way that you're not facing each other face to face, so that you feel that you're in a group, but you're not giving an opinion about anything to anybody. You are simply expressing a visual idea, a dream, an emotion to the space. So nobody can judge you, nobody can interpret what you say. Nobody has an opinion that is better or worse than anybody else. And that is a democratic principle of social dreaming, and that is a connection to cooperatives, because the democratic principle is the absolute principle of cooperatives, and the democratic principle of the social dreaming is precisely that there is no hierarchy, there is no expert. Anyone's dream, anyone's feeling is as equal as anyone else's, and everyone can contribute. So, if you like, social dreaming is a cooperative way of sharing feelings and ideas that if they're not listened to, you take the wrong decisions, in particular in difficult situations. So in difficult situations, you might not want to talk about some stuff, so you hide it away. But in social dreaming, all of that stuff comes out, and so you're better able to take a holistic decision, combining that unknown stuff with the stuff that you already know. So that's the democratic principle of social dreaming, and that's the way it's connected to cooperative development.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Manley. Tracy?
Okay, good evening, everyone. I was actually sitting in the back for a reason. But yeah, I was in the second session. I'm a resident of North Hamilton, so I was in the resident group, and there were about 5, 6 of us, and sitting in the snowflake setting. It was interesting. I mean, we painted a rosy picture of North Hamilton. I wish we could walk out right now and go down the street and walk into that world that we talked about yesterday. But really, it was nostalgic, and we talked about yesteryear and the way it was. I mean, even though many, we have relatives who grew up in the area. Some of us were here in its heyday. But we talked a lot about the way the community used to be, and the dream of it becoming, the possibility of the community becoming that again. So it's possible. It takes cooperation. It takes a lot of work. It takes faith. It takes, togetherness. We talked a lot about safety, so it takes, working with the police. It takes working with the government. It takes community groups. It takes having faith in each other. So, yeah, I mean, it can be done, and I just hope to see us moving in that direction really soon.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Okay, about to wrap up on time. Any last questions for Dr. Manley? Any last comments? Yes, ma'am? Microphone right next to you. Rodney?
Good evening. Thank you so much for this evening. I just want to bounce off your description of what snowflake means. I too have been, I'm really interested in even the way we physically arrange ourselves, and how that can sometimes get in the way of what our intentions are, when our intentions are equality or democracy or whatever. So I'm interested in the snowflake. What would that principle look like? I also want to, because it's connected, I want to note that the room tonight is set up, intentionally, I'm sure, with tables and circles. And there's something about that. I go to a lot of events like this in Bermuda. I love them. I should have like season ticket pass or whatever, but they're almost all free. And a lot of the times we're sitting in rows and there's someone on a stage, and I feel like that encourages power systems of the past. So for instance, like if we're to take away a practical guide from you about, well, if we're going to get into groups and have conversations about advancing this idea and these principles, like how should we even come together? How should we, does it help to sit in a circle? Is a table good? Is a table not good? I mean, are there actual things like that that will help us to succeed?
Yeah. Okay. I think the answer to that is yes. There are clearly practical ways to do things. We had a plan to do some actual practical experiential work tonight, but because we had trouble getting the data out on the infograph, we haven't been able to do that. I was going to have you all doing 20 minutes of mini social dreaming experience. We're going to do that tonight, but hasn't been possible. And of course, that would suck away anything I have to say as the expert in that position that you're referring to, and render it possible and more powerful in groups working, say, in that democratic social dreaming way. So I think there are certainly ways of doing that. And part of it is about what I was saying before, about giving back importance to affect, to the emotions, to the intuition, to the inner dreams, to the hidden stuff. And you can only do that through experiential work. And that's partly what the social dreaming is. It's not just about some expert coming with a few thought-out ideas and spilling them out and hoping that some of that will come or not. It's about people being empowered to think and develop and create and embody that in experiential work. So that was the idea behind the social dreaming work, and I think that's incredibly important. And that, again, that is cooperative too, because what are you doing in a cooperative? You're taking away the expert, the boss, the person at the top, and you're saying, look, you're all able to be bosses, you're all managers, you can all contribute, and you can live that sense of empowerment in each of you, you know? So, you know, there is an absolute connection between cooperatives and other ways of living and thinking, which are actually probably more humane and more human ways of experiencing life, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Fantastic. Great. Rodney, do you have a mic? Yeah, thank you, Richard. Okay, last question, Rodney. If you can make that brief, that'd be fantastic. We can wrap up.
Yeah, just a brief statement that if you are to empower the residents of North Hamilton, you have to give them a bigger vision than what they presently have. Meaning this: North Hamilton ought to be converted into its own corporation. It ought to be cut off from Victoria Street, extended right to North Shore, so that it can do what we're presently seeing the Corporation of Hamilton doing. That proposal was already offered to the PLP government many years ago. Now, this is, if you want to empower people, that's what you have to do. I can't say it any plainer, because if you just thought for a minute, every time we say small business, what are we talking about? Black business. No, what business can operate off of $20,000? So what I'm trying to say, we need to empower people, not just assist and help. We need to empower people. You understand? The government, the present government, or any government just can't. You need to empower, really empower people. If you broke off and started your own North Hamilton Corporation, you would have power. You would have income. You will, or you would be the decision makers, not leaving it to the Corporation of Hamilton to determine what happens in back of town. You would determine what happens.
I'm sorry, Rodney, is there a question for Dr. Manley, or is there a comment?
No, I'm just social dreaming, brother.
Absolutely. I didn't hear that part. Thank you. Thank you, Rodney. Certainly. And the whole financing piece we'll get into, I believe, So we're just going to wrap up now. I'm going to let our Executive Director, Erika Smith, had the last word. I just want to say, just in conclusion, Dr. Manley, thank you so much. I'm sure Erika will say a few words with that. And just to echo what that's Patrice Morgan? Yes, hi. So Patrice asks, where do I go from here? If I'm interested in developing a co-op, how do I get started? Where do I go? Next steps, all of that. And just to be able to reinforce. Now, if you haven't signed in, if you haven't checked in and said, yep, that's my name, or we haven't taken your name and email address, if you just walked in and we have no record of you, there's 8.5 by 14 or so on the sheet there. Please give us your name and email, because that's how we are going out to be able to invite most of you, certainly all of you, to the 4th and 5th of December seminars and workshops. Obviously, we're going to advertise, radio, do the whole thing, but we'd rather talk to you directly. And so all sorts of wonderful educational opportunities coming down the road. And as I had mentioned, look, Spriggs, I don't want to wait for that. I want to get in there right now. I've got 3 or 4 people here. We want to talk. We want to bounce around some ideas. We're happy to do that all day long. Okay? And our email and our number is right there for you. Fantastic. Thank you all for coming out. And Eureka, last words.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. My closing words are about this process, this initiative, and I think most of what BEDC does is to be a facilitator and a connector and a provider of information to act as a catalyst for each and every one of you to be empowered to make the decisions that are best for you and yourselves. It is not for BEDC to tell you what you need to do for your business, for your individual lives, or for your community. Our philosophy has always been about how can we bring you information, access to knowledge, and access to resources to be able for you to catalyze yourself, empower yourselves to move forward. And so that's the principle I want to leave you with today, right? We are just a tool. We are not going to tell you what to do. And so we're committed to helping anyone that's willing to learn and willing to move forward to do for themselves and their community. Thank you all for coming. Drive safely. Have a great evening. And thank you, Dr. Manley, thank you, Dr. Manley, for all of your time, your knowledge, your inspiration, and I know that, we'll be in constant contact with you, and hopefully you'll be back to help us out a bit more. Thank you.